Hey, good morning. I'm Said Baiter from Vox Nostra, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, Karim El Achkar, a Lebanese philosophy, politics, law, and economics student at IE University in Segovia, Spain. And he was also a protester at the 2019 protests in Lebanon. He's here in order to talk us about the current situation in Lebanon. So, Karim, how are you?
I'm doing great, Said. Thanks for asking. I feel honored that you thought about me for this interview, and I'm more than glad to be here and share my perspective on the topic with you.
Yeah, it's an honor having you here. Well, firstly, in order to contextualize people or our viewers of the situation in Lebanon, I would like to know what's happening now and how did this situation started.
That's a big question, Said. I think what's going on in Lebanon right now can be related to back to what Lebanon has always suffered. I'm talking about external interference. Let me explain my point. As we speak, Lebanon is facing its biggest economic crisis ever. It's pretty hard to pinpoint where it started exactly. So I'll give you the date of the event that the US news outlets used and labeled as the start of the Lebanese revolution. 17th of October 2019, a group of parliament members proposed to pass a law which entailed the imposition of a tax on the use of WhatsApp Messenger. Yes, this is that's pretty funny because they will find any and everything to steal from us. But anyways, the people raged and took to the streets. But this law project was simply the drop of water that broke the camel's back. After at least 30 years of corruption, this was bound to happen at some point, which brings me to my next point. Notice how I said at least 30 years because I really can't tell you where this started. I can't tell you when this corruption started, but I can give you we can go down, we can take a stroll down memory lane and I can tell you a couple of events that led to where we are today. So I'm going to start at the end of the Second World War with the Sykes-Picot Accord. Sykes-Picot is the accord that the French and the British signed in order to divide the Middle East area between each other. This, first of all, started disparities between each other, between the different countries. They created states that would never be nations, never ever. They created Lebanon. They created the modern day Lebanon that we know today with about at least five confessions that I could name right off the top of my head. Imagine having this much disparity on a religious level, also on a cultural level, talking about different histories, Phoenicians, Arabs, all in the same area. So this is the first event that I could say started where we are today. Second, I could blame the French when they left Lebanon after the French mandate and left us to basically fend for ourselves. I understand that it is not they didn't feel that it was their duty to help us plan for the future when they left, but still they could have at least guided us. But this anger of them leaving led to them not helping us at all. And imagine a country that has never been self-governed, talking Ottoman Empire, then France. We had never been self-governed in the past. Imagine us trying to govern ourselves straight out of the block. No previous experience, which is pretty hard. And for a country that in Lebanon we call Al Umm Al Hanoun, France, which means tender mother, caring mother, they weren't really caring back in the day. The next event that I will talk about is the Ta'if Agreement, which ended the Lebanese civil war. It was an agreement that basically divided the power between the three main confessions. I'm talking the president had to be a Maronite, still has to be. Prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim, Sunnite, and the head of parliament has to be a Shiite Muslim. This division of power instated a lot of hate and competition, not only between the different confessions, but also inside the same confessions. You would have the Christians fighting for the presidency. We'll not talk about the Shia Muslims because it has always been Nabi Birre. I don't think he's going anywhere. And yes, uh, what else? What else? What else? Basically, this is it. And I will also blame the US and Israel for the turmoil that's been going on lately in the area. So yeah, you can see that I haven't talked about the Lebanese people yet. I've only talked about outside events that have happened that have impacted us. So it's always been outside interference impacting us indirectly or directly, if you know what I mean. Now I will talk about why I blame the Lebanese people. They were not able to put aside their differences throughout all these different issues that we have gone through. Imagine going through a friendship, having many issues with a friend, and still not being able to stay on the same page after like 10 issues that you have gone through together, still having to go through an 11th, a 12th issue. They have to be blamed at some point, and I blame the older generations, and I truly hope my generation doesn't repeat the same mistakes.
Well, and that's pretty interesting, a pretty interesting context actually, because it not only has to do with internal politics, but with international community and the international system as a whole that has affected Lebanon for decades, since its independence. So it's actually nice that you gave us this context so that people can understand exactly. I would like to clarify some concepts. For example, who's Navi Berri, and also what's Maronite, because not everyone knows
Yep,
what
I
Maronite or
understand.
Navi Berri is.
Well, Maronites are like Catholics. Orthodox is just a different division, subdivision of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
They identify as a different confession within Christianity. I do not really know where the origin of this is from. I just know that they represent a big part of
In
the
Lebanon.
Christian community in Lebanon.
Hmm.
Um, onto Nabih Birri, Sayyid Nabih Birri, with
Yeah.
to give my respects, to sound as respectful as possible. Sayyid Nabih Birri has been our head of parliament for about 40 years now. 40, 30, I'm not sure how many decades, but decades.
Okay.
And he doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And this is interesting. This question is interesting, Saeed. I like it because from from studying the case of one member of parliament, of one politician in Lebanon, we can talk about all of them, which means that I talked about the disparity and this competition for power. There is also an agreement between them, an unspoken agreement, an unspoken contract that they have. Let's say, for example, Prime Minister Saad al Hariri. Saad al Hariri has been appointed and has resigned more times than I can count on my fingers, around six, seven times, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the number for sure. This is you can see a pattern here. You can see that it's always the same people repeating and repeating themselves, going to the same positions in parliament. We're also talking about the same warlords from the civil war, from the Lebanese civil war. These same people who signed the Taif Accord are still in power today. Let me give you the example of someone called Robert Fadel. Robert Fadel was a politician, a member of parliament, who, in my opinion, was probably one of the least corrupt, if not completely uncorrupted members of parliament. One of the rare ones. Okay, Robert Fadel resigned in 2016 when President Michel Aoun imposed himself on us. Would you like me to clarify how he imposed himself, or do we just?
If you want to, if it's needed, then do it.
It's also an important event. Would Are we going to bring up the subject of Hezbollah or not? Because if we are, this is an important event.
Yes, yes.
Okay, then in 2014 we were supposed to have presidential elections in Lebanon, and this we stayed without a president for 2 years. This happened because General Michel Aoun um, wanted so bad to have the seat to be president and decided to not attend parliament meetings with his whole bloc being 8th of March, talking about the Free Patriotic Movement, General Michel Aoun's movement, Hezbollah, and Harakat Amal, Amal being led by Sayyid Nabih Birri. These parties, this coalition didn't show up to parliamentary meetings, which meant that the parliamentary meetings would collapse because of a a certain number of parliament members not being present.
Mhm.
And so we would not have a president until everyone agreed to vote for Michel Aoun when they showed up to a parliament session. So you can see here how they all agree within each other, and these conflicts that they have between each other, this is just a play that Molière could have easily put up.
Yes. Well, I think you have just stated your point, but I would also like to ask you, what do you feel and how do you feel about this current situation? I mean, you already told us what was it about, but I just want to know how do you feel about it?
Well, as a 20-year-old first year university student, you can understand how sad I am to see that my country is going through this, and anxious. Sad because we could have been way better off if a lot of these events that I talked about hadn't happened in the past, and anxious because of many reasons. First of all, me being in Spain, not being in my country to be able to go protest, to be able to know every minute what is going on, this delay of the information getting to me makes me anxious. The fact that my family is still in Lebanon, that makes me very anxious. A lot of factors make me anxious, and it is understandable. I feel like a lot of young Lebanese people who fled the country to study abroad feel the same anxiousness and the same sadness and desire to protest. This desire to make change something, to make a change. We can. We're the generation that will change something, and it many generations before us have said the same thing, but it is not the same anymore. Nothing before happened like October 17th. Nothing happened like that. Nothing happened like these sanctions that are being imposed currently by the US government on Hezbollah. Recently, a Lebanese public figure, activist, and Hezbollah antagonist, if I may, he's he basically opposes their views and writes about them. Luqman Slim was assassinated. He was shot in his car, in a rented car, on his way somewhere, and they found his body in this car in a Hezbollah controlled area. President Joe Biden said that we should be expecting new sanctions on Hezbollah. Nothing like this has ever happened before. So I'm hoping for good things, and I'm expecting a changement. I don't know. I don't know how good this change will be, but I'm expecting a change.
Hopefully, and that leads me to a personal question I have that wasn't in the script of it, and it is like, how do you feel Lebanese citizens and Lebanese young people that are living abroad can help to solve the situation, and also how can Lebanese descendants to some extent help to solve, or at least to let the world know about this situation in Lebanon?
I'm going to tell you about a couple of things that I've been doing myself, and that I know, and I know other Lebanese students have been doing abroad, and hope the others will follow. An NGO was created in Madrid called Thrive for Lebanon, and it is in Madrid, but I personally in Segovia have been promoting their events all the time, promoting their fundraisers. At one point, we raised about $10,000 to rebuild three houses that have been damaged in the blast of the 4th of August. Um, I've been talking about Lebanon, giving presentations in my class, explaining the Ta'if Accord, the Ta'if Agreement, explaining the Sykes-Picot Agreement, taking part in discussions, and even in classes that talk about mainly the US and the Western world, trying to give an insight on what's been going on on the East, in the Middle East area, trying to let people know, let the people all know this is what we should do. We should let the people know, because we can't count on CNN or Fox News or BBC. We can't count on news outlets to share the news, because the Beirut explosion appeared a maximum of 5 times on CNN and was gone. a maximum of 5 times. But let me give you an example of why it should have been longer. My house took 5 months to be rebuilt. Maram Khail Street, St. Michael Street, still hasn't been rebuilt. Still working on it. it I wish, I hope that students, Lebanese students abroad, are doing what I'm doing and being activists. It's a word I don't usually use, but in this case, I will use it. Just talk about Lebanon. Talking is more than enough. Talking will incite people to think. Thinking will incite people to want to help, or at least also talk about it.
Yeah, that's true. So you already talked about the 4th of August explosion, and I would like to know how do you think this explosion raised awareness of the Lebanese crisis worldwide?
Well, um, first of all, you have to wonder, was there enough awareness raised? I think there was awareness raised, but when you walk in the streets of Segovia or at the cafeteria of IE University and you bring up the topic to a student and you ask them, they're like, oh, yeah, the harbor exploded. And it's about all they know. They do not know how big the radius was. They do not know that it is the third biggest non nuclear explosion in history. They do not know that 75% of this explosion went to the ocean, which means that if it was in the center of Beirut, half of Lebanon would have been erased. Not enough information is given, not enough awareness has been raised. However, the simple fact that they know what happened, some people were incited and pushed to do their own research to figure out what was going on. How did this happen? Like what kind of nonchalance in French, what kind of negligence led to this event? A lot of people did their own research. A lot of people were incited to learn more and to ask around. A lot of people have asked me what was going on here where I live. Even where I live, a lot of people have asked me questions, felt bad about asking the questions, telling me that they're, I'm sorry if this question will hurt, or I'm sorry if this question will make you feel uncomfortable, but they are asking. People care, but we can't trust the news outlets to make the news reach them. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, well, and as a witness and a victim of the 4th of August explosion, how did you feel during that day, and especially during that moment? What were your thoughts of it, and how was your experience? Because I think it's pretty important, not only for you, but for your country and for the viewers to know what was it about, how did people feel about, how do you feel about right now, and in order to raise that awareness that you think that that there is one.
Uh, okay, I will say that I was one of the lucky ones on the 4th of August. Um, to all the dead and their families, may their souls rest in peace. Um, basically, I I wasn't a physical victim of it, thank God. My family is safe. We live relatively close to the harbor. I can see it from the window of my room. My house has been destroyed, but thank God my family is safe, and that's all that matters. It's how do I, this this day was just shock. Shock is the word for it because you don't know what to feel. When you have this rush of adrenaline going through you, not necessarily positive adrenaline, just adrenaline, not even stress. When this explosion happens, and my dad, who has gone through the Civil War, grabs my shoulder, throws me on the ground, and throws himself next to me, the house shakes for a couple of seconds, and I check on him, run to the door to check on my mom. There was no time for sad emotions. There was really no time for that. It was just about getting out of there, going to the mountains because the air was unbreathable, making sure that everyone in the family was safe, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandfather, grandmother, calling your friends, calling your loved ones. I don't think anyone understands what it means. Not anyone, but most people don't understand what it means to call your best friend to check if they're still alive. It's not an easy phone call to make, especially when your best friend is on their way to your house. and end up having a concussion and needing about 6 units of blood. I don't think it was an easy experience. It definitely made me grow and made me realize that a lot of stuff is worth it and a lot is not. But yeah, shock and adrenaline is basically what I felt this day. I didn't have time to process it. I just had time to make sure everything was going to be okay, because everything was not okay. I had to make sure everything will be okay in order to process the information. And I left for Spain a month later, and here is where I started processing the information of what had happened. Here is where I started remembering, and it's a traumatizing experience. And I'm glad that I'm I think I have a strong mentality. I think got through it pretty easily, but a lot of people didn't, and it still haunts them. Maybe in the middle of November, somewhere around the middle of November, there was a thunderstorm in Lebanon, and people were scared to death of just the sound of the thunder. And it's a subconscious thing. So the three words I will use to summarize this experience is shock, adrenaline, and post-traumatic.
Yeah, indeed, because it's a very hard situation, and of course, people are not going to be relieved of it from one day to another, because it's not it's very hard, and it's something that almost for example, you as a new generation guy never experienced before. Maybe your parents or grandparents at the civil war, but not everyone. So it was a new experience, and of course it was hard because you never expected something like that. Even I remember asking you and asking Carl and other Lebanese friends, and like you were shocked and you didn't know exactly what was happening. I remember one of them saying to me, "Oh, I think we are at war, or that someone throw a bomb here or something like that." So it was pretty shocking, and I really and I was also shocked when I received the news here. It was 10 a.m. I guess, or 11 a.m. Here in Colombia, and I was shocked. I really thought that people were like just joking or or saying that because they were confused or something like that. So if I was shocked, I can't imagine how shocked you were that you were in.
It's
And
also it Now that you mention it, and I remember, it was all the first my first reflex was to talk on my class group first from school, and class group as in all the class from the same generation, the freshmen.
mhm,
There's about 250 of us.
mhm,
First reaction was to tell them explosion near my house. I didn't know it was the harbor. I was the first to send a message. I sent explosion near my house. Someone else said me too. This person lived on the other side of Beirut. Someone else said me too. And this person lived in Rabia, which is another city. And I said, okay, that's three. Anyone else? Because we were starting to pinpoint locations. We thought there were about 7 bombs at one point. And then someone said, explosion be Beit al Wasat. Be Beit al Wasat. Beit al Wasat is basically where Saad al Hariri works. This is where works or lives, I'm not sure. But Beit al Wasat is near the harbor. And it wasn't targeting Beit al Wasat, it was a hangar of ammonium nitrate. There was another hangar that helped with the explosion. They say it was fireworks. I say bullshit. I don't really know what it was, but I'm sorry for the word. You can bleep it later. So
no, no, don't worry,
you
don't worry
understand.
about that.
But you understand how expressive this word is. I
Yeah.
literally called them on their BS, and everyone did. Some people say they saw an airplane flying over. Some people say they heard the airplane and the strike. I didn't, and I highly doubt that it would have been outside interference. You know who I'm talking about, because they're not scared of saying that they did something like this. After what they've been doing in Palestine, I don't think they're scared of being unrecognized by the UN or having tweets against them or anything. You get my point. They're not
Yeah.
afraid of saying when they do something. So I don't think it was them.
Mhm. Yeah. Me neither. And well, taking into account this whole situation, this very exhausting and complicated situation of the 4th of August that lead not only to international recognition of the trouble and also to some extent to awareness, because there were a lot of YouTubers and people from the US, New Zealand, Australia that also organized and helped and contributed to the situation, like to rebuild the city and the quarters and all that. And which solutions or which are the most viable solutions that you think you as a student think that can help Lebanon survive this crisis and this hard times?
First thing would be a moral value that I'm going to call unity. The Lebanese people have never been united. We've never been a nation because of many factors: religion, different histories, different affiliations to outside forces. I'm going to talk about unity. We should be united as a nation. Put our differences aside and find our similarities. Focus on our similarities for once, not our differences, because this is what makes a nation. A nation is a united people. This is what we first need. We can't build a state without being a nation. It will fail the same way it failed over and over and over again. So a nation, unity. Second of all, I'm going to talk about protesting. Something I always said is that the revolution is a pyramid, and at the bottom of this pyramid, the big slab that holds this pyramid together is protests. Without protesting, anything else doesn't really matter because protesting is the voice of the people. You know how in constitutions the voice of the people is always mentioned and how power belongs to the people? In the US Constitution, we the people. In the French Constitution, la voix du peuple. Protesting is the main movement, the main action that we can do to keep a revolution alive. What we need next is a political front. We need new political parties to step up. We need professionals. We need people with expertise in different fields. Let me give you an example. We had we had the Minister of Education, the past Minister of Education, became Minister of Health in his next term. I can see your reaction. How does that work? How does that work? Find people with expertise in certain fields. Find someone who studied economics and put him at the top of at the head of the Lebanese bank, Banque du Liban. Find a doctor and put him as Minister of Health. Find a professor at university. We have a lot of professors, a lot of genius professors, a lot of people who deserve Nobel Peace Prizes. I say peace because I think of this is why I make fun of the Nobel Prize. I'll talk about it later.
Okay.
A lot of people who deserve Nobel Prizes and have won prizes all over the world and don't have any recognition in Lebanon. Why? Because warlords want to play roles that they can't. They want to fill shoes that they cannot fill.
And they want to
They
control
want to
everything.
they want to step into positions that they cannot. They want to be the queen on a chessboard when they're only the pawn. They want to move around. They want to do everything they want. They want to do anything they want when they can't even step one foot in front of the other. They can't move a country forward and they want to lead it still. It's about personal interest, but let's not get into that. So, a political front, back to my point, we need new political parties to step up, to go to the election booth so that we can go to the election booth and vote for them. Hezbollah has been spreading rumors that the Shiite Muslims represent a majority in Lebanon. They've been spreading this image, not this rumor, that they're a majority in Lebanon and that even if everyone went to the booth, even if we had a, a 100% rate participation from the people in the elections, the Shiite Muslims would still take the advantage. I'm sorry, I'm talking about religion and confessions, but this is the sad reality of Lebanon. This is not true. This is very not true. I understand how I I understand how discouraging our voting system can be as they keep changing it in their favor to stay in power, but it is still not a lost battle. It's still we lost a couple of battles, but not the war, theoretical war. I don't encourage war anywhere. So we need a political front. We have political parties who have been created recently. Mintashrin. Mintashrin is a party that has a lot of young men and women who could provide us with a change, a much needed change. Fresh faces that have not been in the civil war, that have not that were probably born after it. This is how fresh these faces are. The National Bloc. The National Bloc is a controversial one because you remember this ex-parliament member, Robert Fadel, that I was talking about?
Mhm.
Robert Fadel is one of the leaders with Pierre Issa of the National Bloc. It's a controversial one because some people did not like his presence in parliament. So I will not promote the National Bloc as much as I promote Muntashrin. But I will say that the ideas that they are promoting and the fact that they're standing against the government right now proves that they deserve a chance to be in parliament, to be in the government. There's a lot of other movements. Lihaqi is also another movement, activist movement. I don't know if they have a political facet yet, but they could. So I'm talking about all these movements. We need a political front, not a party, a front, and a complete change. Nafda in Arabic. Get them all out of here. You know what nafda is?
No.
Using a broom and getting everyone out,
Okay. Yeah.
getting the dirt out. We need a nafda and a new front. This is what I think could lead to a change in the future. And a last thing, I'm sorry I'm taking so much time in my answers, but I'm remembering points slowly.
Yeah. Don't worry.
Laicity, putting religion aside. I understand how religion can be important in people's lives, but mixing religions and government has never worked. We can look back in history and see that it has never, ever worked. The countries that are most flourishing right now, the social democracy that we have in Norway, Sweden, Finland, these perfect countries do not know what religion is as a government, as a state, as a nation. They know individually what it is because they enjoy it and they live by it. And I respect that. And they pray and they believe in God, but that has nothing to do with governance. Do not mix these two things. And this is what we've been doing for as long as Lebanon has been a state.
True. Well, and we have already talked about internal politics and about the creation of new parties and new blocs. And what about the international community? To what extent do you think the international community, and for taking France as the main example, because as you said at the beginning, you have a very strong relationship with them. Um, how can the international community either intervene or help to some extent solve the situation in Lebanon?
Right. I understand that beggars can't be choosers, but I will state that we requested help from the international community because it was much needed. But this request came from the people, not from the government. And we asked them clearly to send us aid, not the government, to give it to us in our hands personally. When Macron was in St. Michael, when President Macron was in St. Michael Street, we asked him for aid and we told him, don't give anything to the government, give it to us. We'll work with it, we'll use it. We'll use it to rebuild our country. And this leads me to my next point. We need help, we need aid, and we're gonna keep asking for it for as long as we need it because we can't get through this alone. We genuinely cannot. But the problem here is when we ask for help and for aid from countries who only have self-interest in mind and their country's interest in mind, we can only but expect them to search for their interest. Let me explain. In Lebanon, we have a lot of petroleum in the ocean. under the ocean that we cannot extract, that we do not have the resources or the expertise to extract. This is why the US has its eyes set straight on the Mediterranean Sea from the Lebanese side. And we can't ask for aid and expect them not to want to interfere later. So we're in a very difficult position here where I blamed outside interference before and I'm rejecting it now. But if we're going to ask for aid and help, we're going to have to expect some sort of attempt
Intervention.
of interference.
Mhm.
And this is where we're in a very tough position. I don't think I have the knowledge enough or the expertise to to figure this one out. Not yet. I hope that in 4 years when I graduate, I will, but not yet. I really I don't know. And this is where again I hope for the best, but I don't know the best is gonna happen.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, I would also like to know the exact answer of it, and I don't think neither experts nor students of international politics, international affairs know what's going to happen, or know to some to which extent can international community interfere or intervene or help or solve the crisis, because it's a very complicated situation. And nowadays, most of the governments and most of the states don't want to be involved at wars, because it would only lead to more and more conflict. And we can take Syria as an example.
Do they not? Do they not though?
They do it, but they do not want to start wars as they were doing it in some decades before.
The thing is, they do. Well, I'm not trying to object with you. I'm trying to discuss with you this point. They do, but never on their soil.
No,
See,
indeed. They do it in the country, in the soul of the country they want to interfere or to intervene in. But what I meant is that nowadays, governments or states are trying to get rid of doing this kind of stuff because of Syria as an example of it. You know
yeah.
that this war has not worked, and it's still people still fighting in Syria for nothing. So I don't think neither the U.S. nor Iran nor Israel nor Russia and nor the countries that are interested in Lebanon and Lebanon's resources want to fight a war there, because it won't
I
be profitable at all.
I don't think it is in the best. Okay, the possibility of a war in Lebanon. I don't think it's in the best interest of any of the parties. Let me explain why. I don't think it's in the best interest of the US to cause this kind of turmoil in order to get to our petroleum because we are Israel's direct neighbor, which is their biggest ally. They do not want such turmoil on the border because imagine having such turmoil on the border in the middle of Lebanon that Hezbollah does not care anymore as they are already at risk, already in danger, have nothing to lose, and decide to strike on Israel. I don't think it's in the best interest of the US. But then again, I might be missing a few points. I don't think Russia has that much interest in us. They have their own pipelines all over Europe. I do see their interest in Syria, which is foolish. But anyway, another point that you're bringing me to right now, a war in Lebanon, is the proxy wars that have been going on as part of the Cold War between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Mhm.
Lebanon could be the next target, potentially. Lebanon could be the next battleground, but I don't think, again, it's in the best interest of any of the parties. I don't think Iran would like its pawn in the middle of the Middle Eastern coast, Hezbollah, to be a danger. I don't think Saudi Arabia would like to lose its interests in Lebanon, to lose its assets. I don't think it is in the best interest of anyone, to be fair. So a war is something I would place very, very far fetched.
Yeah, and what
Not
about
impossible.
of course it's not impossible. Because every day, like this, the whole situation is changing and unexpected things can happen. And what about maybe the possibility of a new civil war?
I think it's very related, as as I just mentioned, proxy wars that have been going on throughout the whole Middle East as part of the Cold War between Iran and Saudi Arabia. A a civil war is always something. Look, take for example Syria. You mentioned Syria. The civil war in Syria is promoted by different out external parties, different external interferences. Each one has its hand on a certain pawn in Syria and moves it around according to its interests, trying to regain certain territory, trying to retreat, trying to save certain assets. So in Lebanon, a civil war would not break out if there wasn't external interest at stake here. I hardly believe that even if it were to be the people versus the government, I think the farthest this could go is how Tripoli has been, and it is protests and maybe clashes between the police force and the people. But a civil war is just no one would gain anything from it or benefit anything from it. And the civil war that happened before, these warlords are the ones in government right now. They do not have conflicts against each other. They work together in order to steal whatever we have acquired throughout the 30 years. Our money is stuck in the banks because they all have it. Riyad Saleh, the president of the Lebanese bank, Banque du Liban, is has been working with this government to steal these checks that we have been seeing going to Switzerland and to Luxembourg and to all of these European countries who have a safe economy. This is them working together in order to enrich themselves. So I don't think they will fight between each other. They are all Hezbollah's dogs at the end of the day. This is how I call it. And I'm looking at my glass ceiling because I'm expecting an F-22 to come and strike me. But you get my point. They
Yeah,
will
yeah.
not they will not fight between each other. They don't see us as a big enough threat. Even with our new political parties forming, they don't see us as a threat, as an actual threat to their governance, which they should, but they don't know yet. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, let's really hope that this doesn't happen and that you can get rid of a war, of an international war, and also of a civil war, which won't lead to anything and will
Yeah.
worsen the situation. And well, I think it's time for us to finish this interview. And indeed, the situation in Lebanon deserves way more attention in the international community. And well, as I said, I really hope Lebanon recovers itself from these hard times and that Lebanese people recovers from this hard situation, especially because of the coronavirus, because of the financial crisis, and all of that. And thank you, Karim. Thank you very much because of your time and because of your knowledge and everything you shared
Knowledge.
with us.
I try, Saeed. I try to be something I want to be in the future. Fake it till you make it. That's what we're gonna call it.
Yeah, that's true. But thank you very much because of your time and your knowledge and everything you have shared with us. Because it's pretty interesting having another point of view. And for example, here in Colombia, not everyone knows. Even though there's a huge Lebanese community here, well, taking me as an example of it, and a lot of friends and family members, of course. Not everyone is related to the political situation there because it's a country that's far away from us. We just know that the capital city is Beirut, and we also eat Lebanese food all the time, like kibbeh and all of that, and that's how mostly non-Lebanese people is related to Lebanon. But and that's why I really wanted to make this interview to you in order for people that's not related to the country at all knows what's happening there because it's interesting. It can also we can also relate to some extent, of course, because it's not the same. We can relate this situation to the situation in our country, for example, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and nowadays that we have a lot of different political parties with and political leaders which have its interest. and the next year is it's going to be the election year. So we are on a very complicated situation right now, and we can relate to some extent the situation we are living and the problems you have. So that's why I'm really thankful because you are here.
I'm thankful because now my voice reaches even further, and I'm thankful because now even more people will know. So thank you.